Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Vibing with Sleazy, the podcast. This is season 6, episode 3. And I want to thank everybody for listening, tuning in, and downloading. I've had episode 1 and 2 come out in the past few days, and people have been downloading, so it's been a lot of fun. I want to shout out Christine Hernandez for the last episode. It was about an hour and a half of just talking about New Mexico and out west and the weather. So it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate everybody showing love on that episode. So for episode 3, I have a special guest. This guest was on season 4, and we broke down her art and we discussed who she was and cryptids, and that's something we'll definitely be getting into again. So my special guest is none other than Whitney Yadon. So I want to thank you for coming on. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course, of course. That episode was a lot of fun. On season 4, I was really trying to get as many local artists that I could, and shout out to Riley Dickin. He got us, connected, and he's connected me with a lot of artists, and he runs the What Makes You Smile Gallery and Gifts in the Highlands. So if you haven't been there, check it out on Bonnie Castle, and I shouted him out in episode 1. So Riley's a big supporter, and he does a lot of big things for the local art scene. So I'm glad he got us connected. So the first thing I want to talk about is you weren't on the last season, but you were on the previous season, which was about probably 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So what new art have you been working on?
So last time I think I was mostly just doing cryptid oil paintings and stuff like that. Now I've been doing a lot more of needle felting, and I've been working a lot more with gouache. Gouache is kind of similar to, it's kind of like an in-between of acrylic paint and watercolor.
Okay.
It's water soluble, so you can use water to like thin it out like you can with watercolor, but it dries pretty quickly like acrylic, and it has like a matte finish, and it's pretty highly pigmented colors.
Oh, that's awesome. So what got you into that? How'd you learn about that?
So I'm always interested in learning new arts and crafts stuff, so I'm always browsing YouTube to look for new stuff. And I just kind of happened upon it on YouTube and thought I'd give it a try. And I really liked it because I always have trouble with watercolor because you have to layer it so many times. And then with acrylic, it dries so fast, and I just can't work with it as well as I can with oil paint. And I was looking for something that was like a little easier to set up, a little more compact, a little more, I could take it on the go with me and stuff like that. And the gouache worked out perfectly. It's a nice little easy setup. And since it's kind of in between watercolor and acrylic, there's a lot of techniques that I can do with it that's not similar to oil paint, but I can get into it a lot easier since I have the oil painting background.
Oh, that's cool. So, how comfortable did you feel after starting to do it? Did it take you a few times, or did you feel like, oh, I'm natural at this right off the bat?
It definitely took a lot of getting used to. I had to watch videos and practice a whole lot because it you have to work at it sort of the opposite you do with oil painting. In oil painting, a lot of times you want to lay down your darkest colors first. With gouache, a lot of times you want to lay down you basically want to lay down your main color and kind of work off of that. And a lot of times you'll do your lightest color first and then come back in with your darkest colors. And that way you can kind of, if you put a darker color on first, it's going to be harder to cover it up with a lighter color. Whereas that's different with oil painting. You can just totally go over oil painting is just so forgivable. You can go over it, you can scrape it off. It's very easy. But with gouache, you have to do layers in a way to where you can build upon them.
Okay, that's awesome. So, what would
If
you?
that makes sense.
No, definitely, definitely. And so, do you feel like you are kind of just getting away from oil painting, or are you just adding this as another repertoire to your arsenal?
Well, I haven't completely thrown out oil painting. I haven't really been doing it as much. I've been doing it pretty sparingly here and there, mostly just because oil painting takes up so much room and it takes a lot of setup and breaking down because you have to have your whole setup, you have to get all your paints out, and then you have to mix paints, and then you have to make sure you clean everything up, and there's a lot of chemicals involved, and you have to have a nice area because you have to have area for your easel and your canvas and your palette, your cleanup station, your brushes, all of that. So I have been shifting more over to doing a lot more gouache stuff, and it's been a really fun process because I definitely can tell that I've been improving, and I can definitely do it. It's a lot easier for me to get out and set up and clean up. And I really like that if I'm traveling or anything like that, it's pretty compact. I can easily throw a sketchbook in my bag with a few colors, and I have a collapsible water jar. So it's very easy to take on the go with me, which I really like. So I've been getting away from the oil painting, although it is still my first love and I still love it. And I'm hoping in the future I will be able to expand to a larger home and be able to set up my own studio area so I can have a dedicated oil painting space.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you're not getting away from it totally, but it's awesome you're trying new stuff. I wanted to ask you, so what are some colors that you like? What are your favorite colors to use, and what would you say your favorite colors are when it comes to oil painting? Then maybe with the wash, like what do you like to see it? What colors do you feel like best turn out for you?
My favorite colors, I really like cool colors. I typically work more with a cool color palette. Blues and purples are my favorite. I tend to use a lot of green though. I'd say green is probably my number one predominant color in both gouache and in oil painting, mostly because I like to paint a lot of forest scenes. I love painting moss and trees, things like that. I really love uh, cabins in the woods and woodsy scenes. So I do use a lot of green. Green would be probably my like number one color that I use, but I do really love when I'm doing indoor scenes, I do really love using some more muted blues and purples kind of and grays and bluish grays are kind of colors I really like.
Sweet, sweet. So, do you feel like you're still doing a lot of the cryptids and that with your art, like adding those in? And is that something that you're still loving?
Yes, I would say I have moved to predominantly cryptid arts. That is more or less what I do. I haven't done much outside of that. Typically, I do a lot of scenes that are either in interior scenes or out in the woods scenes, and I like to incorporate my cryptids in there, just kind of living their best lives, doing whatever, just kind of doing everyday things. Um, and I pretty much when I'm sitting down to do a painting, I typically think, what cryptids am I going to put in here? What would I have them do before I even start? So I kind of have that always in the forefront of my mind.
And so, something I want to go over, and like I said, from the, season four, I know I asked you some questions about this, but what do you feel like some of these your favorite cryptids to add, and have you noticed a difference in doing them from oil painting to wash that they're maybe turning out kind of a different look at all?
Yeah, so my favorite ones to paint would be Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster. Those are my two favorites to paint, mostly because they're both from West Virginia, so it makes sense for them to be in a scene together. And then I also really like them because they're really fun to paint. The Flatwoods Monster, the shapes that incorporate that creature are really fun to paint, and you can make it look really dynamic and realistic. And then Mothman is really fun to paint too because even though he's like mostly all black and he's kind of like a black void, it's really fun to be able to lighten areas and be able to show contrast and shape using different painting techniques. And the main difference I've noticed between oil paint and gouache when painting them is I can get them to look more realistic in oil painting, whereas in gouache, I typically make them look a little more cartoonish, a little more unrealistic or fantastical, I guess.
Gotcha, gotcha. And so you mentioned West Virginia. Um, would you say, and I feel like you've really dug into and learned about cryptids and over the years, even before we had met, it's always been kind of a passion of yours. Do you feel like every state has a cryptid represented?
Yes, yeah. So there are so many cryptids out there. There's definitely at least one for every state, and there's so many more popping up just all the time. And there's more even worldwide that I've discovered, which when you look into them more like worldwide, they're not really they don't really call them cryptids. They're more like folklore creatures. So
And would you say when it comes from the states, is this just for the listener, is it something where people maybe in like let's for example Iowa, they're seeing a particular cryptid. It's off of stories that people are bringing together, and it's just a common occurrence, or is it? Do you feel like cryptids a lot of times is usually just one person that has come up with the idea of that creature?
that's a great question. It's kind of a mix of both. It's kind of one person's experience, and they've told a bunch of people about it. And then also, it's experiences from several people over the years and over time. It's kind of a hodgepodge of both, sort of stories passed on through generations in oral storytelling traditions, and new ones will pop up because people have, cameras now and things like that. Everyone has a phone in their pocket. So a lot of times people will record themselves out and about in adventures, and when they look back at their video, they'll spot something that they don't have an explanation for. So a lot of times then they'll show it to friends and family or they'll put it on the internet, and those people will be like, "Oh, I've seen that too," or "I have something similar to that." And then those stories kind of come together to form sort of cohesive narrative around what the creature could be or what other people's experiences could be with it. And yeah, they just kind of travel that way, kind of in the traditional sort of like oral telling of stories in like folklore.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So with us being in Kentucky and then also being right across the river from Indiana, what are some cryptids in the Kentucky area and the Indiana area that people have been saying that they see or it get talked about?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So Kentucky's main cryptids are the Poplick Monster, aka the Goat Man. And so in I guess technically it's Louisville. It's the Poplick area of Louisville, which is kind of right by Taylorsville. There is the Poplick trellis, and the trellis has a long history of deaths and hauntings and things like that. And so there are several stories of kids being interested in the trellis and climbing up on the trellis at nighttime. And the trellis is, gosh, it's so far off the ground. It doesn't have anything on the sides of it. It's basically a large train track just above the ground, and I want to say it's like 50 to 100 feet. It could be more than that, I'm not sure. But basically, kids would dare other kids to climb up there and walk across the train trellis and see if the goat man would get them. And a lot of times kids would then get halfway across the tracks and a train would come and they wouldn't have time to get back to the other side and they wouldn't have anywhere to go. So they would end up either getting hit by the train or falling off the tracks and passing away on impact. And that's sort of from kids just like goofing around and daring each other to do silly stuff on this trellis, people started coming up with a story of Goatman saying it was a creature up there pretending to be a train to scare these kids and pushing them off the tracks. Because sometimes people would say, we heard a train, but then we never saw a train, things like that. And then Kentucky also has the Hopkinsville Goblins, which the Hopkinsville Goblins is from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That one is based off of a sighting in the 1950s. This one family at their farmhouse, they were just hanging out on their farmhouse, minding their own business basically, and these little green aliens, these 4 foot tall, I think the like original account said that they had grayish, greenish skin, big heads, and they had these giant ears and giant yellow eyes. And they basically terrorized this family. This family was horrified. They saw these little creatures all over their farm. They ran out and they ran into town, and other people had actually seen these creatures as well. But it was this one main incident with the farm family, and that kind of spiraled into other people in the town being really interested in UFOs and aliens and those kind of things, and kind of keeping an eye out for them. And several spottings being noted throughout the years. And Hopkinsville, actually, they used to have the Hopkinsville Goblin Festival, but I think they're going to bring it back this year. But since COVID, they have had to stop doing it with all the restrictions and everything.
Do you feel like with the cryptids, are they always trying to scare people and do things, or is there any cryptids that actually have good intentions?
Um, that's a good question. For the most part, I think it's kind of that most cryptids are trying to just do their own thing. They're either creatures from another planet coming to study us, check us out, see what's up, or there's some sort of creature that lives on the earth that doesn't want to interact with humans. And so out of a primal fear essentially of seeing humans, I think that is what provokes them to act out, and not necessarily with an evil intention, but as like a self-preservation sort of way. Because a lot of times when people see like Bigfoot and are hunting Bigfoot and things like that, there's several different accounts where Bigfoot is friendly and he'll rescue children that are missing in national parks and keep them, from being exposed to the elements and feed them until they can get them back to their family. And then there are instances where Bigfoot has terrorized somebody and attacked them. And I think what happens is just like with humans, some of us have good intentions, some of us had bad intentions. It kind of just depends on the creature and the instance that you've come upon them. If they feel threatened, they may try to attack you. If they just happen upon you and you seem like you're not going to bother them, you're not there to hurt them, then they may just will go about their way. I kind of think of it as sort of wild animals, how we interact with wild animals.
Bigfoot's got the Sour Patch Kid vibe. He wants to help, but then he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna scare some people." So, no,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's cool. So, would you? Okay, so I love geography and talking about states and different things. So, I want to ask a couple more questions about it. So, with what state would you say they say has the most cryptids? I mean, is there a popular state that has the most?
Great question. I don't know what state would have the most. I guess I would think West Virginia has quite a few, but that might just be because West Virginia cryptids tend to be some of the more popular cryptids in the cryptid community. Those are the ones you see outside of Bigfoot, the West Virginia cryptids are the ones that kind of get talked about the most. They get their own festivals. And I don't know if it's just in West Virginia, they are more interested in their creepy, weird folklore or what it is, or if there's more sightings and stories. But it seems to be that maybe West Virginia has a lot of them. Those are the ones that I feel like are more popular and more talked about.
West Virginia is such an interesting state. There's a lot of mysteries to it, and a lot of people see things and say, like you said. And then there's also, I feel like it's one of those states that a lot of people don't know a lot about. So there's probably, who knows how many mysteries out there. But yeah, I feel like that's probably common in a lot of states where we don't talk about them a lot, or big cities. It's like there's possibly these creatures out there. So let me ask you this, for your personal sake, what's a state that you would like to visit to maybe go search for a cryptid or just learn that's outside of our area?
Oh man, that is a good question as well. I would be really interested in probably trying to go to Washington State and just trying to either, yeah, probably Washington State and trying to seek out Bigfoot just because he's like the main guy in the cryptid world, you know?
Yeah.
Um, there's several different like states and places you can go because Bigfoot's pretty ubiquitous. He's kind of everywhere. But I would think like Washington State is such a like strange state and it has so many like beautiful wooded areas and just wild places that you have a pretty good chance of running into something pretty weird and spooky there for sure.
Yeah, I could see that. And to be honest, the more you talk about it and just thinking about it, the cryptids actually remind me of Pokemon. And the reason I say
Yeah.
this is Bigfoot's kind of like Pikachu. I know they don't look alike, but it's like Pikachu's your main guy, and it's like there's Bigfoot as the main person. So I'm going to ask you kind of a random fun question. Would you say what would you say to that, like talking about Pokemon as a random thing, or a cartoon like that? Would you think that a lot of the entertainment that we watch over the past years, and especially that animated stuff, do you think it's motivated off of cryptids? Do you think cryptids are motivating the artists to come up with these creatures at all? I mean, do you feel like that's your opinion?
I definitely think that is a good point. I definitely think that cryptids could very well be a likely source for a lot of creative people. Um, just like drawing on any sort of, you know, as an artist, you always draw on the things that you already are familiar with, you already know. A lot of times, a lot of horror movies are based off of people's own personal scary stories passed down from families and things like that. And so then they become a well-known story. So I think a lot of things like Pokemon, manga, and anime, I think they draw a lot from things like that. I know there used to be a game maker called MetaZoo, and they made cards pretty similar to Pokemon, and they had a cryptid set of cards that were cryptids, but it was a Pokemon card essentially, but it was like cryptids. And so that was very cool. And so they obviously had gotten inspiration from Pokemon, and then they incorporated cryptids into it, which was very cool. And I know that there have been several like Hollywood movies. There was the movie Antlers is based off of the Wendigo story, which is a controversial cryptid because it's actually a Native American folk tale.
Okay.
And then there is the Loveland Frogman. They released a movie last year about the Frogman, which was a really fun movie. It's like a found footage sort of scary movie, and that was really fun. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of inspiration taken from cryptids and just folklore and old stories in general. Especially, I feel like nowadays in Hollywood and movies and books and stuff like that, there's just not a lot of originality going on. And so I think a lot of people are going back to, generationally old stories and old tales and tales from the past and history to kind of look for inspiration.
That's cool. And I was going to ask you kind of more of a basic question, and mainly for the listeners because we had discussed this in the past. What would you say are your key characteristics to labeling something a cryptid, and then also not just your characteristics. Like, do you feel like, I'm not saying you, for example, but do you feel like other people that are into this are uh kind of dictate what can be and what can't be? Would you say that is like is that a discussion in the cryptic world if it's like, oh, I don't know if that is one because it's not matching those characteristics?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question because it is a discussion in the cryptid community. Because, like I said when I was talking about the Hopkinsville goblins, they're technically aliens. And the Flatwoods Monster is another one that's technically an alien. And so when you think about that, it's like, well, is an alien a cryptid, or is that a different thing? Is that a supernatural being? Is there a difference? The definition of cryptid is a creature that has not been scientifically proven. So if you use that definition, it can kind of be loosely applied to almost anything. I mean, aliens in general could be applied to that because we don't know for sure if, they're out there or not. And people say that they have seen them and interacted with them. I mean, ghosts could also apply to that because we don't know if they exist, but people have experiences with them. And so there is a lot of like discussion in the cryptid community, and a lot of people say, there are people that are like, well, it has to be a real documented experience and there has to be some sort of quote unquote evidence, photos or recordings, things like that. And then there are people that say, like, oh, it could be any sort of creature that people have had some sort of interaction with that we don't necessarily know or think is a viable creature in the world, there is another set of cryptids that are called the fearsome creatures of the lumber woods, and it's based off of old lumberjack stories.
Oh,
And
cool.
most of those cryptids are pretty bizarre, and it kind of feels like maybe they're not really like based in reality, like things that lumberjacks saw, but maybe stories lumberjacks just made up to entertain each other while they were out there on the job. Um, and so are those technically cryptids because they're not really been cited, but they're creatures that have been like made up in this tradition. So yeah, I do think that it's a big conversation in the cryptid community, and I think it's up to personal interpretation. I really just think of cryptids as any sort of creature that hasn't been scientifically proven that people think may be out there. I think to me that encompasses a cryptid. And I don't know, I'm pretty flexible and open-minded when it comes to that because I think it's hard to really put things that we don't know about in a box.
Oh no, 100%. And I was going to ask you too. It's like, do you feel like you've seen a cryptid ever, or do you ever feel like even an animal that maybe is known to the world or scientists like that, you're like, man, that could actually fall into a cryptid if we weren't proven? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so I unfortunately have never had an experience with seeing a cryptid. I am a big chicken and I don't like to go out into the unknown, searching for these kind of things, and I get really scared, especially with wildlife.
Mhm. No, I
So,
get it.
so yeah, I have unfortunately not had an experience with that, which is totally okay. Um, one we always in the cryptid community, I always like to incorporate the possum into the cryptid community because it is such a weird creature. It only like sparingly comes out at night. It has such a bizarre reputation, and it's just like a weird animal. So I have these little possum stickers, and I always say that it is a cryptid, even though it's not.
And in the possum, he's so misunderstood, and they're
Yeah.
North America's only marsupial. And I love possums. I remember as a kid, I grew up in the Jeffersontown area of Louisville, and we had a field behind my house, and I go back there play baseball with friends and stuff. But I remember walking like I'd walk around the tree lines and bushes, and there was like an area where there was tons of possums, and especially even as a teenager, I was so shocked by it because I was like, oh wow, those things are wild looking because it's not an animal you commonly see at maybe a zoo. It's not an animal that uh, a lot of times, sadly, it's roadkill or has been hit on a road and stuff. So it's not like something you really see. And like you said, they're trying to kind of be on their own and be private. So it's like I was always blown away by them. But there's a lot of animals that are interesting. That I was actually going to look on my phone real quick. There is an antelope that I had just discovered recently, and it's over in I think it's in it looks like it's from, yeah, it's called, I found it. So it's called the Sega antelope, not like Sega Sonic, but Saiga. And if you look it up, and for people listening, look up the Sega antelope. It has the craziest face. And if you didn't tell me that there was so many in Kazakhstan, is actually where they're at, it's like Star Wars. It's literally like a character that you would see out of Star Wars. I just discovered it about 2 weeks ago, and here I'll try to hold a picture up to the. You can see like the face has this
Wow.
easy thing on it. So at the end of the day, if if I looked out or if I was at the zoo or anything like that and I saw that it's blew my mind and I sent it to a couple of my buddies and they were like, "Oh, quit sending me that AI stuff." And I'm like, "No, this is a real antelope. Like this has a real face." So, seeing that is actually like knowing you were coming on the podcast, like I have to mention that because it has cryptid vibes for sure.
100% that does. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. I mean, because I love like talking about the antelope species. There is a lot of ones that like they have different body types and horns and facial structures. I mean, even a lot of people don't realize the bongo, which I think is in the antelope family. It has that brownish orange skin, and if it reaches a certain temperature and you get your human hand by it, it can actually kind of rub off onto your skin a little bit that color. And a lot of people
Oh,
don't.
wow.
And the Addicts is also something really cool. I always like to show love to the Louisville Zoo. The Addicts, there was only 17 in the world in the country of Niger over in Central Africa. And now the Louisville Zoo is actually bred like over 30. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
on the come up and they're not a real common animal. So it's cool to see that happen. But yeah, a lot of those antelope species, just looking at them, they're such an interesting animal. So I could see also how they could have some cryptid vibes too, as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's one cryptid. I don't know where it originated, but it's called the knot deer.
Okay,
And it's basically like people have run into this animal that has jumped in front of their car, or they've seen it on the like running in the woods, and it looks like a deer at first, but then when it turns to them, it is not a deer.
that's wild. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because I feel like if you were a person that saw a cryptid out, number one, you're gonna of course think in your head, no one's gonna believe me, or I gotta try to document this. But
Yeah.
number two, besides the feeling of like having to try to prove it to someone, just proving it to yourself is it's got to be a mind altering experience because you're like, did I just see that? Was it real? And the whole,
Yeah.
like trying to verify what you actually really saw. Um, so two things I want to talk on that you brought up the Poplick monsters. So when you and I spoke on season 4, there was a Poplick festival, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you got to be a part of it, correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I actually I did it that year and last year. It's called Goatman Festival and it's at Hope Lick Park. It's not where the train trestle is, but it's like right across from that. It's part of the Floyd's Fork
Mhm.
and Louisville Loop sort of park connection thing. So it's over there and it's in October. I forget the dates this year, but it's always in October and it's a really fun time. This past year, it was awesome because it was the second year for them doing it. So they had more vendors. They had this really great setup to where all the vendors were along this little path. They had this little field area. They usually play a couple movies because it's Friday and Saturday night. So they'll have a movie Friday night and a movie Saturday night. They have vendors, they have food, they have music, and then they have different games and stuff too. They run a couple different escape rooms out of that like main little building area that they have there, and then they have a haunted woods tour thing that they do there. So it's a really great event, and I definitely will be doing it this year also.
Awesome, awesome. I'm glad you got to be a part of it, and that's really cool to hear that it had positive reaction, and especially from a vendor. So you felt like it was really beneficial for you.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The first year they did it was really great. It was, a little unorganized, but it was the first year of the event, so that's expected. But this past year it was really awesome. They really stepped it up. They were very organized. They had a great attendance. They had lots of different things to do, and it's free as well. So you come, you park, you can do what you want to do, and you don't have to spend any money if you don't want to. And it's great for families, for kids. It's great for adults. It's great for dates. I mean, it's just all around like a really fun, really well done event. And it's really nice for Louisville to have a specialized event that's just like really well done. And it's really nice to see other cryptid vendors coming to that event. And so many people came out and so many people bought stuff. And it seemed like everyone had a really good time that I talked to. And so I'm really happy to be part of that event.
In a lot of those festivals, what's great about it is it brings a community aspect together. And like you said, you're bringing a lot of cryptid vendors together. You're bringing people from that community. So even as someone you didn't know, you get to kind of network with them, kind of see maybe what they've created, but also probably learn stuff from it as well. And what I really like about the Poplick Monster or Goat Man was I grew up in J Town and I grew up probably 15, 20 minutes from that area, and I remember in high school, me and some buddies parked our car under it, and the tracks, and tried to get the spooky vibe. Of course, we were all spooked out. We're like, "Oh, would you hear that?" And so there was always a mystery, and I love reading the stories about it. I remember, I'll never forget. I was sitting at a bonfire. I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and I heard the story for the first time, and I was so freaked out. And I remember my parents, we actually had talked about it a few years ago. I had asked so many questions on the way home. Is that real? Is there really a go man out there? Or is there a monster out there? So it always really grabbed the interest of everybody in that area. I mean, I remember talking about it at school at J Town and just locals here in Louisville. There, what's also really cool about it is not only did you mention people getting dared to go up there, or people say they got pushed, there was also the a couple of the stories that I've heard are pretty interesting. So like three of the stories that I heard was number one, there's that story in theory that he fell off a circus train and
Yeah.
was left there and pretty much was like going to haunt the area. Number two, I heard is that there's some little cabin or shack somewhere up in the woods area up there, and that's where he lived and would come out. And then the third thing that I always heard was the story about the Boy Scout pack that camped out there, and they were having rocks thrown at them. And most of the scouts and one of the scout leaders said that they could see a goat man or somebody throwing that at them. So and there's other
Oh
theories.
wow, I haven't heard that one. That's interesting.
Yeah, like I've tried to dig and look in the past, like because I love ghost stories, of course, and paranormal, and I love looking up stuff in my area. Like, yeah, I like to explore the world,
Yeah.
but I love to see what's in Kentucky. That's why I was asking those questions about Kentucky, because it's like when you're in a certain area and you've lived here for a while, you want to know what's happened around here and stuff. So
Yeah.
I feel like, let me ask you this. So, what do you think your reaction would be? Not saying at the festival, but say you did one day, you just got the courage and you saw Goatman. What would your reaction be, you think?
Probably to run as fast as possible. I definitely, it's so funny. I was just talking about this with my boyfriend. I am very much like they say that you have fight or flight. Well, I have freeze for the most part. I would probably be just like dumbfounded and not know what to do. And then if anybody was with me, they'd be like, "What are you doing? Come on."
Yeah.
I definitely would not at all think to take a picture or record or anything. I probably would be good to remember that I needed to like get away as soon as possible. So that's probably what I would try to do after I got over the shock of coming into contact with the goat man,
Yeah.
especially since he's been responsible for deaths. I would be very terrified.
Yeah, I would do the same. I would be like, I got to get out of here. I'm not sticking around to hang out. I would be shook at first, of course. I'd be like, "Oh," but then like you said, it's like I got to get out of here. But I feel like in a way it's these cryptid stories and just ghost stories in general, it just shows the importance of storytelling
Yeah.
because the goat man wouldn't be known if the stories weren't passed on, just like other cryptids and just like just talking about the community. So I think it's important for people to share these stories, even if it scares the crap out of a kid or scares the crap out of some people. It's like it's good to pass that on because that's how those legends stick around, and that's kind of how a cryptid gets known in that area. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think the oral traditions of passing along ghost stories and spooky stories is just something we should keep doing. I mean, I think it's part of who we are as humans, and I think it's just part of our tradition, and it's just in our blood to want to scare each other, I guess.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so important with podcasting. Podcasting blowing up
Yeah.
the past 15 years, it's been important because there's so many stories shared in sports, music, all different topics. But when it comes to cryptid and paranormal, a lot of stories do have been coming out because of podcasts or people's actual experience. So it's fun to listen, even if someone is telling something and you might not believe it. It's fun to hear their perspective on it because it's like, wow, like I wouldn't even thought that was out there, or you saw what, that kind of deal. So I think it's really cool, and I do think there is some kind of mystery just in that area alone. Like for the people listening, if you're outside of Louisville or you never been to where the Pope Lick or Goatman area is, just those woods in general and a lot of that stuff, you really don't know what could be out there. And I want to tell another crazy little story. Like probably back in high school, and I'd say it was like 2007, 2008. My drama teacher told us to film a movie about like a folk legend or something. So we did John Henry, me and like 8 people in my drama class, and we had a camera that we got, and we went out and shot it, and then you were supposed to edit it. Well, we were in the woods area. Now we were uh probably a few miles away from that area, but still on Taylorsville Road in the woods. And we were walking and exploring, and we were trying to find just something that would give us like a wooded area look, but also like train tracks because of John Henry and stuff. Well, we found a cabin, literally in the middle of the woods. So at first we're like, "Oh, that's cool. It's a cabin." And we walked up, and there was 2 picnic tables outside the cabin, and I was like, "Well, that's cool. Somebody built this in the middle of the woods." But we opened it up, and I swear to God, when we opened up the cabin door, there was a black coffin And
My.
yeah, I swear to God, the coffin was standing up. It was painted black. It had been sanded. It had gold latches, so it had literally three latches down the side, and it even had a spot where you could turn to like lock it. And it was just sitting inside the cabin. That was it. Now, at first, we were all spooked, of course, and then we kind of walked back up there to be like, is this real? And then we're looking around because we're like all high schoolers, like, is there somebody waiting for us? Like, and then, but at the end of the day, what's crazy, we shot that video in probably, I'd say, 5 to, or maybe even a week to 2 weeks, like 5 days or something, where we try to get together after school to go shoot it. We went back. We went back to look. The coffin was gone the next time we went, which was maybe
Oh
a
my goodness.
day or a couple days later. So I don't know if somebody was messing with us. I don't know if the goat man had something. He's like, hey, I respect this victim. I'm gonna bury it. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it was wild, and yeah, it was away from the public monster, but it was in that area like a few miles away, and it was crazy to think about. It's still crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's
So
really bizarre.
yeah, I've still to this day I can visualize it and it blew my mind. And I remember telling my parents about it and other people and they were like, "No way." And I'm like, "Yeah, like it's just in the middle of the woods." So you
Wow.
always
For a minute, I thought you were gonna say the cabin wasn't there anymore, and I was gonna be like, oh my gosh.
that would be nuts. If there was no cabin, I'm getting it way out of there. But
Right? Yeah.
But it was kind of in an area that I feel like they were trying to eventually develop or build on. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's popping up in that area, like just even on the lead up going to Taylorsville. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. And also I really would like to know, I feel like the people that grew up in that Taylorsville area, it'd be really fascinating to hear their theories and kind of like a comparison of like what Louisville residents have heard, which is still a few miles out, and then the Taylorsville. You wonder if there's two different perspectives in that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I bet they've definitely got a lot of stories. I did watch there was this thing on Hulu. I think it was called The Paranormal Files or something like that. I don't know. And it was about basically doing like a forensic sort of story on cases with a paranormal aspect. And so they were talking about the cases of deaths with the Popelik monster. And so they had interviews from people from Taylorsville and how a lot of them were very unhappy about the fact that everyone has like come to talk about and know the Popelik monster because it influences more people to go up there and causes more sort of like deaths and than people they know have been victim to it. And so I wonder if a lot of times they just prefer not to share what they know about anything going up there as to not spark curiosity, you know?
And I used to hear, I dated a girl, Dana. We're still friends to this day. We dated for a couple of years, about 10 years ago, and she lived in the Taylorsville area. And I remember just, I'd hang out with her friends, or go out to that area. And I remember there was some people would have a rumor like if you see a train cross, it's bad luck and that kind of deal. And I remember actually, probably a few months ago, I was actually out towards the Parklands area, that park area out there where they built that stuff. And I remember seeing a train, and I was like, even at 35, I was like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to see a train up there. So it's just funny too, the stuff that you hear as a kid or when you're younger that impact your brain, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's still spooking me even the older I get. Like no, I'm
Yeah.
supposed to see that. So, but yeah, there's so much mystery in that, and but I think that's awesome that you've done that festival and that you're gotten into it. I know that you have also gotten into your stuff at the Kentucky State Fair, and I kind of wanted to talk to you about that as well. Uh, how like let's go from like the beginner to the end. How do you get into the fair with your art? How did what do you feel like the judging aspect is, and then just kind of what's the process?
It's actually a pretty easy process to get entered in. I think really anybody can enter into the fair if you want. You just have to enter before the deadline and pay the fee. I think the fee is like $15 or something for each category. And so I just went on the Kentucky State Fair website and I applied. I picked my categories, I paid the fee, and then when time comes for the fair, they send you an email to say, hey, come drop your stuff off. You take your stuff, you fill out a little ID card for your stuff, and then drop it off. And the judges actually judge it before the fair opens, and then you don't know what if you've gotten any ribbons or anything like that until after the fair opens and you go and see. They like don't tell you.
That's so
I guess
cool.
as a way, yeah, as a way to like get you to come, because you do, if you participate you do get discounted tickets too. So it's really fun to enter. You don't know if you want anything or not, and then to like go and see. It is really fun. Although it's really funny because I entered this year or this past year, and then the year before I entered one painting and then a felt piece. And the first year, my painting didn't win anything, but my felt piece got third place,
Oh,
which was really
congrats.
cool.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And then this past year, I entered a painting and a felt piece, and my felt piece didn't win anything. And then my painting actually won not a first or second place ribbon, but one of the purchase awards, which a purchase awards they have, I think it depends on the category, but for fine arts, they have two purchase awards, and basically this it was Erler's Ice Cream Company. They had X amount of money to offer someone to buy their piece of art. And so they offered to buy my piece of art, which was very cool. And so I got
Congratulations.
this. Yeah, thank you. It was very cool because I got they paid me money for it, which was very cool. And then they also gave me this like big fancy blue ribbon, which was very cool. But I didn't know until after the fact because the Earlers people they had actually bought my painting and one other one, so they didn't have two ribbons to put up there. So I had no idea when I went to go see.
But no, that's awesome and well deserved. And like I said, it's really cool to be able to display your art, especially to the state of Kentucky. And that brings everybody from every county in there. So it's always cool to walk through there and you see the different ribbons and the different displays. So, no, congratulations. Very well deserved.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so fun to see like what everybody does, especially like in your category, you can kind of see what everyone else does. My felt piece, I think I went too weird for the judges because I think for the most part they're like fair judges, so they probably want something fairly like normal that they know. And for my felt piece, I did the ambassador from Mars Attacks, if you remember that movie from the
Oh,
90s.
that was a wild movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did the main ambassador guy from Mars Attacks and then the little dog that they put Sarah Jessica Parker's head on. So I did that together, and I think they were probably like, what in the heck is this strange thing?
No, that's
So,
cool though. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to do what you like and the vibe, and see the message. But no, you do.
yeah.
So I want to talk about the felt. So you are, what are some things that you've been making with the felt?
So I just started doing my felting this year and I've done I have some over here. I did so my next event is Frogman Festival. So I started making these little frogs.
Oh, those are adorable. I
And
love
they
the
have
felt.
like little moving arms and legs and stuff like that. So I'm
That's
making a bunch
dope.
of these.
That's so
Thank
cool.
you. And then I decided to branch out. Normally I make like I have a lot of little Mothmen that I make. Those are like a standard felt that I have, but I also started making some other creatures. Just the other day, I made a jackalope.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
That's really cool.
yeah, basically a rabbit with antlers
You make
for
it
people
so
listening.
realistic, and
Thank
for the
you.
people not listening, or for the people that aren't able to see it, it's a she makes these things, and they're so realistic. They look just like you're gonna have to look up her socials afterwards because the stuff she makes, it's like I'm telling you, these frogs, they are perfect frogs. Like that, that is so cool. I mean, that frog, the frog that you held up, those two frogs. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What was that book about the toads back in the day? Remember the animated where the toads were talking, and that kind of gave me that vibe of those. Remember those
Is it
toads?
just like Mr. Toad
Yeah, I
or
think it was Mr. Toad or
think
something. I just remember that
yeah,
artwork from back in the day, and it just kind of like I was like, oh, Mr. Toad. So no, that's awesome. I think
thank you.
no, I think you make those really well. And so, what do you feel like to kind of go back into what we were talking about with wash? Do you feel like you caught on to the felt stuff real quick, or do you feel like what do you feel real natural with it?
Yeah, so the felt is kind of different. I felt very drawn to it naturally, and I felt like I picked it up really fast. I felt like it really clicked with me. I had wanted to do some sort of sculpting or some sort of 3D art for a long time, and I had played with clay so many times, and clay just does not work with me. It is just not my jam, even though I desperately want it to be. And so the felting actually worked out so well, and it just vibed with me just perfectly. And so it's really funny looking at my like first felt projects because they were not very good. But I just fell I just fell in love with it so much that I just love doing it, and it makes sense to me. For some reason I can like figure it out in my brain.
I could see you in the future doing like a felt scene, like how you like green and you like doing the woods and moss and stuff, building like a felt forest and then having your felt creatures in there. I could just see that, like,
Yeah.
on like a really cool display. And I feel like too that would even be a really cool display in someone's house. It's like you come in and you know how people have like in Christmas they got their nativity scenes and they got their people in Halloween they'll do their little set. It's just I think that'd be really cool to have like here's my little village, like my little like in Christmas when people do their villages and stuff. It's like you got a felt village. That would be super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love dioramas, I think they're called. I think those are like so cool. I am really interested in doing stuff like that. I just don't really have the room for it. But I've always been interested in stop motion animation. And so I have been starting to kind of play around with that using my felts and have been thinking about needing to make some felt trees and things like that for scenery and background. So,
Oh, cool. So I was going to ask you this too. You have now dove into, you got a YouTube channel. I have
yeah.
checked it out, and I will be honest, I didn't get to watch the full clip yet, but I saw you were out. Were you hunting for a cryptid, or you were looking? And you have this still where you're like holding your like you look like you've been shocked by something. So go over your YouTube and how you've kind of enjoyed that.
So I've been wanting to do YouTube for a while now, but I'm really introverted and I just like was unsure about how to really like go about it. So at the end of last year, I decided I'm gonna do this YouTube thing. I'm just gonna like record stuff that I'm already doing and just like go from there. And so I have a lot of like ones where I'm recording my painting process from start to finish. And then I have some where it shows me felting from start to finish and you can kind of see the process. And those videos I really like to do because they're pretty low effort because I'm already making the stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And then I thought it'd be really fun to do a hunting a cryptid video. Since all of my art is based around cryptids, I was like, this is a thing, people are always doing. So I decided to go look for one. And I have a short, small clip of cryptids.
Nice.
in my video.
No, I like it. I like it. And I saw that and I was like, that's really cool. And I'll be honest with you, I'm on the same page with you when it comes to YouTube. So never, I made some funny YouTube videos with buddies in college. Nothing that's, I don't even think's out anymore. But the thing about it was, doing that John Henry thing I had mentioned in high school, I always like, man, videos are fun. Well, now I've been using, I got to pull up the actual app name, the CapCut. And what I've been,
Yeah.
so, so not only does my podcast now goes on to YouTube, I've only been audio, I've always been just audio with my podcast. But the good thing is you can now listen to them on YouTube. But what I did was with the YouTube channel, I had been off work for a few months and I was thinking to myself, how can I be creative? It was still warm out. So what I did was I went through like my hard drives and like my social media and I took like random trips that I did, the photos, and I edited them into mini videos and did minute shorts, but also made like a few minute video of like trips. And it's so cool because when you post it, people will randomly reach out or comment, and I've had people be like, "Oh, I want to try that or see it." And a place, for example, I went to Hodgenville, Kentucky, and I tried that Laha Burger place, and
Oh yeah.
I did a little mini review and just took the pictures, and it was so cool that when I posted it, there was so many people that had been wanting to try Laha or see it. So you get connected through that, and I've noticed too that like I've talked to people, and people are like, "Oh, hey, I followed the channel, and it's cool seeing your trips." So what my motivation is, besides doing the season 6 this year, is like I want to get out there and do some more trips and more things. And I'm a big sports fan. It made going to sports games so much more fun where I could like do the whole baseball game from start to finish and do photos and kind of tell a story of what I just experienced. So I think it's really cool that you're venturing into that. And let's get into that cryptid hunting. So do you think you would want to do some more videos like that?
Yeah, so the plan is to do some more videos like that. Like I said, my next event is going to be the Frogman Festival. So I asked a couple friends that I'm going to be going with if they would want to help me shoot a video where we're kind of looking for Frogman to um see if we could find him or any indication of him. And then there is another one. There's a festival in August that I'm going to be doing called Squonkapalooza for this cryptid called the Squonk. And I have a friend, my friend, she's the one that heads that event. And I was like, oh, it'd be fun if we did a trying to find the Squonk video as well. So I think I am going to try to do more of those videos. I think those are I guess like algorithm wise, that video didn't do great, but it was a lot of fun to make and I really enjoyed making it. So I kind of feel like I'll just make some more and see what happens.
Yeah, and at the end of the day with YouTube, if you get one view or a million views, at the end of the day, I view it as this. Someone is watching, someone is listening. It doesn't matter how many you get. It's just cool being able to express yourself and put that story out there. And I feel like with the algorithm stuff, I've just noticed that it's like hashtags work really, really good. And I feel like too with what you're doing, I feel like the more you put out, you're gonna bring in more cryptid watchers and viewers, and
Yeah.
you have such a knowledge about it, and I think it's cool that you're not only hunting for it, but you're actually creating stuff to represent these cryptids.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think I don't know, I kind of felt like any outlet I can put myself out there is a good way to reach people and if people like it, that's cool, and if people don't like it, that's fine too. And overall, it's a fun thing for me to do, and it's another way for me to kind of document my artistic process and my artistic experience, and that's just like a cool thing for me to have in general. So,
No, that's awesome. That's really cool, and that's how I feel about it too. It's like I like creating stuff. I mean, I just being creative is always fun, and it's something to express myself with. So let me ask you this: so with 2025 just starting, it's only January 12th. This episode I'm going to put out on Wednesday, the 15th. So let me ask you this: do you what would you say are three key goals with your art this year?
So my main goals this year are I want to get the YouTube channel up and running. I want to release about a video a month. Right now I have a couple that I've created that are upcoming, and I figured I'd release them as I have them on my mind and in the works. Otherwise, I'll just like forget about them and they'll get lost in the mix. So ideally, I want to create about video a month for the rest of the year. I want to try to get to 2,000 Instagram followers.
Okay.
I'm at like 1,700. I know that's kind of like a shallow sort of goal, but I think that'd be really cool to get it to 2K. And then I want to just do some more festivals that I haven't done and maybe do some bigger festivals as well. Because last year I stuck to my cryptid niche and I did some further out festivals and that was really successful. And I think that really helped me reach out to just more people that normally wouldn't see my stuff. And that was very cool. So I want to try to get a broader reach and sort of do some of those festivals I'm a little scared of, a little larger ones at like convention centers and expo centers and things like that. So I have a couple that I have like pending applications, so we'll see. And so it'd be really cool to do a bigger festival.
Awesome, awesome. And like I said, I have to say I'm super proud of what you've accomplished. And since we've last spoke, you're not only evolving in your art, you're evolving in your cryptic knowledge, you're evolving in your exploration, and like you said, being introverted, you're doing something to create and trying something new and getting out there. So I think everything you're doing is super cool. Before I have you give out your info to contact and get art, I want you to tell the audience and myself three cryptids to check out that are fascinating to you.
Okay, three cryptids. So the first one is my favorite. I absolutely love the Fresno Nightcrawler. I think I might have mentioned this one last time, I don't know, but it's my favorite one. And it's such a weird one, and it's one people ask me about all the time whenever I'm doing events. And there's two videos of it that you can find on YouTube, two quote unquote security footage videos. And it's such a weird, bizarre cryptid. The first video is from Fresno, California. It shows one of the creatures walking across the lawn. The second video is from Yosemite National Forest, and it shows two creatures, a big one and a small one, walking through the woods. And they're just these very tall, white entities that look like everyone in the cryptid community calls them the walking pants because they look like just a pair of white legs with no discernible features, just walking along, and they're very strange. So
Wow.
definitely check that one out. That one's one of my favorite. The next one would probably have to be the squonk, as I mentioned him just a minute ago. The squonk is actually one of the creatures from the fearsome folklore of the lumberjacks, or the fearsome creatures from the lumberjacks. He's one of those stories, and he is the most relatable cryptid that you'll ever come across. He is a cryptid that lives in, I think it's the pine forest of Pennsylvania. He just kind of sits around and cries. And when you stare at him, he cries himself into a puddle of tears because he feels so ugly.
Oh man, poor guy. Poor guy.
I know. So he is like the saddest cryptid and he needs a hug all the time. So the more people that know about him and share love with him, maybe he'll feel a little better.
Yeah. He needs some love. What's your third?
Exactly. Yeah. And let's see. The third cryptid would probably have to be maybe the Loveland Frog. That is another one that doesn't get a lot of hype. That's not very well
At
known.
Loveland, Ohio.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
So it's from Loveland, Ohio. I don't remember when the accounts occurred, but there were a few accounts of people seeing this amphibious entity walking around on two legs. They said that he was anywhere from like 3 to 4 feet tall, and there were reports of him carrying a sparkly wand in the forest.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I always kind of think of the Loveland Frog as like a wizard frog because of that. And it's just like a very strange thing to have a humanoid frog as a cryptid. And since there is now a feature-length movie, which I think it's on Prime Video, I think that's where I watched it. A friend of mine actually did the artwork for the cover of that. But the movie is really interesting, and you can watch the movie and get familiar with the lore of the Loveland Frog, and then you can come to the Loveland Frog Festival in March.
Oh, that's awesome. See, I think it's so cool. There's a festival for each one. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it is really cool. So, so Whitney, please tell everybody how they can reach out or get art from you, and give your sign off before I do mine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's Whitney Yadon Art, Whitney underscore Yadon underscore art. You can follow me on Instagram. That is where I post most often. I post all my stuff on there and I post where I'm going to be on there. You can also find me on Facebook. All of my Instagram posts are automatically linked to my Facebook. So if you don't have Instagram, but you still want to see what I'm posting, you can check me out on Facebook. Again, it's just Whitney Yadon Art. I also have my Etsy page. My Etsy page, I'm trying to keep up to date more often. But it does always have my list of events at the top where I'm going to be at, and you can kind of like browse through there to see what kind of prints and stuff that I have to offer. And if I'm not going to be coming anywhere near where you're going to be at, you can always order something from there. And you can always reach out to me on Etsy or Instagram. And then please check out my YouTube channel. Again, it's just Whitney Yadon Art.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I think it's awesome that you were on the show. I can't thank you enough, and you're always a great guest. I'll have you again on in the future, and we'll have to catch up again to see how your 2025 went. But I hope you reach all your goals, and I think that it's super cool what you're doing, and I really, really wish you tons of success with your YouTube. I want to thank everybody for listening, tuning in, and downloading. This was Vibing with Sleazy, the podcast, season 6, episode 3. And check out BibleWithSleazy.com, Bible with Sleazy, the podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Show love, show comments, and definitely support and buy Whitney's art. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and we are out. Peace.